Hi everybody. If I'm half as eloquent as Colm, I'll be absolutely delighted. It's lovely to be here, G for Fod. I first met Sylvia back in Harare in the garden outside the office that I was working in 2012. At that first meeting, I saw the spark in her eyes, but I didn't know then the depth of her journey or just how much I would learn from her. About a month prior to that, I'd been home in Ireland at a technical meeting on HIV and women's empowerment. And at that meeting, I listened to a presentation by a master's student as she explained her work on self stigma and HIV. And it was with a rising sense of alarm that a realization hit me. The program that I was deeply passionate about, the one that I believed in, had a fundamental flaw. Like many, I had fallen into the trap of assuming that if we challenged structural injustice, if we addressed institutional discrimination, criminalisation, and societal judgment, we'd eradicate internal stigma. The reality was much more complex. I had believed that external acceptance would lead to inner peace, when in reality, people living with HIV experienced internal stigma at 3 times the rate of external stigma. As Chief Justice Edwin Cameron put it at the time, too many still fear to test. Too many still fear to take treatment. Internalized stigma often proves lethal. His words rang in my ears. And not just because this was a professional challenge, it was also something deeply personal. I too had felt the heavy weight of self-doubt at different times in my life. I knew the debilitating and crippling feeling of believing that I wasn't good enough. That personal realization and the understanding of the scale of this issue was my call to respond. Maya Angelou invites us to do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. I knew I had to do something different, but what? I went back to Harare and I reached out to the Zimbabwe National Network of people living with HIV. I knew I couldn't do this alone and I needed help to find a way forward. And that's when I met Sylvia, or Auntie Sly, as she is affectionately known to the people who know her well. Sylvia was in her early 40s, a really proud primary school teacher, a churchgoer. She lived in a flat in downtown Harare with her son, and she was the driver of a tiny little red car, which I think was probably her most prized possession in the world. I sat in that garden and I explained my concerns to Sylvia. We weren't doing enough to address internal stigma, and we needed to find an answer. I asked Sylvia to take a leap of faith. She did. Sylvia was already a leader in her community, respected, trusted. She had the ability to bring people with her. But Sylvia's greatest strength, her absolute superpower, was her ability to examine her own life. Sylvia looked at her own HIV diagnosis, at the premature loss of her husband, and the confusion, the anger, the immense and the complex grief that came all at once, as well as this new challenge of raising their son alone. Through this process, Sylvia saw how inquiry, deep personal reflection, could find or create a path to self-worth. Together, she and I began experimenting with inquiry-based stress reduction, the work of Byron Katie. And over time, a pilot program that we later called We Are the Change was born. This 12-week course took a group of men and women living with HIV through a transformative process, examining deep ingrained beliefs. Beliefs like, I don't deserve love. I'm less of a person. I'm not good enough. Through 4 questions and turnarounds, a technique used to gain new perspectives. Participants learned through inquiry how to examine these beliefs and ultimately how to rewrite their own narratives. The results were extraordinary. People who had known the weight of internal stigma for years, some for decades, started to experience profound shifts. They moved from shame to self-acceptance, from self-stigma to self-worth. And at the heart of this transformation, was one simple truth. The antidote to internal stigma is love. Love in the form of deep compassion, self-compassion. Love in the form of human connection. And love in the form of seeing yourself as whole, valuable, and worthy. The journey wasn't always an easy one. Steep learning curves on the one hand, meager budgets on the other. It meant we never stood still. The hardest days of all were when we lost our friends, Mercy, Moses, and Cloud, 3 beloved members of that pioneering We Are the Change group. Their loss was devastating, but it fueled our commitment to continue the work. We expanded the program. Sylvia and other participants from the course, they went on to become coaches, carrying the work with them out into their communities. And me and that Irish researcher, who some of you will know as Dr. Nadine Ferris-France, we went on to co-found an organisation called Beyond Stigma. We set our sights on new challenges. Among them, how do we support young people on their journey from internal stigma to self-worth? In collaboration with Sylvia and the coaches, an outstanding organisation in Zimbabwe called IGHNx, and most importantly of all, with young people living with HIV themselves, we co-created Wakakosha, meaning I'm worth it. That evidence-based program moved out into communities in Zimbabwe, to Rwanda, to Ghana, and beyond, helping young women, sex workers, adolescents living with HIV to see themselves in a new light and to reconnect with their self-worth. Recently, I had the absolute privilege of seeing Sylvia in action in Ghana, standing in front of a group of young women, sex workers and young women living with HIV, sharing her story. I saw how her words resonated and how they listened. And in that moment, I realized just how much trust, love, and learning had shaped this journey. Not just for Sylvia, not just for me, not just for those who walk this road with us and who continue to walk this road with us. The thing about this work is that it is both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. There's absolutely nowhere to hide. When you do the work, when you do deep self-inquiry, you create the space for others to do the same. 13 years ago in Harare, Sylvia took a leap of faith. She believed that everyone has value, that everyone deserves peace and to know self-worth. And in the years since, she has helped hundreds of young people to do just that. As for me, I'm profoundly grateful, not just for the privilege of being part of this, but for what it has also taught me about my worth. Because Sylvia didn't just help all those others to believe in themselves, she helped me believe too. Wakakosha, I'm worth it.